Good morning. Thank you very much for this invitation. Imagine we create a mechanism to solve disputes between women and men. But in this mechanism, only men present cases against women. Would you say that is fair? Second, if woman wins a case in this mechanism, they don't receive any compensation. Only men receive compensation in this mechanism. That is ISDS. In the year 2000, I didn't knew nothing about ISDS, nothing at all. How was it that I began to know about ISDS? It all began, and I hope it will work, with the case of our struggle against the privatization of water in Bolivia. In Bolivia, water was privatized in September 1999. The company that took the facilities of water in the city of Cochabamba, Bolivia, was an American company. And they increased the tariffs in 300%, 3 times. So in less than 6 months, you had an uprise in the city of Cochabamba and in Bolivia. And the contract of privatization with this company was broken. So we were very happy because we managed to stop privatization and to revert the privatization. But then I began to know what is ISDS. In the year 2002, this company, Bechtel, an American company, presented a dispute in the International Center for Settlement of Investment Disputes against Bolivia. It was the first time that I heard that. That company, that was only 6 months in Bolivia, was asking for a compensation of $100 million, between $25 to $100 million. We said, why? Maybe they invested $1 million during those 6 months. Why they are asking for $25 to $100 million of compensation? And this company, Bechtel, invoked the bilateral investment treaty between Bolivia and the Netherlands in order to sue us in ICSID. So for me, this was a puzzle. What is ICSID? Why they ask an expropriation that is so big? What is the bilateral investment treaty? What does an American company has to do with the Netherlands? That is when I began to learn what is ISDS. It's a puzzle. There are 3 pieces in this puzzle. There are many more, but 3 are the key. One is arbitration, second, consent, third, the rules. What is arbitration? Arbitration is a process of resolution of disputes outside the courts. You don't present a case to the court, to the judicial system. We have a dispute between Jack Chai and me, and we say, instead of going to the court, we're going to ask a third person, Charles Santiago, to be the arbitrator. he will look at our dispute and we will agree that everything that Charles Santiago say, we will follow. That is arbitration. So instead of going to the court, we say we will appoint an arbitrator, Charles Santiago. He will solve the case. So in order to have arbitration, both parties that have a dispute have to agree. Agree means to give consent. To consent to bring that controversy to one arbitrator, to one arbiter or arbitrators. Normally we call that arbitration tribunal. And the decision of that arbitrator, we both agree that we will follow. So arbitration is a process outside the judicial system. Now, arbitration cannot happen if there is, first, there has been a story. Arbitration was between privates, persons. We have a difference with Jack Chai in relation to a business that we did together. We can say we go to arbitration. There has been also cases between states. For example, there was a dispute between the US and Great Britain in relation to Venezuela that also went to arbitration. But the new issue about ISDS is that it's the first time that you have arbitration between a private, that is a corporation, and a public, that is a state. So a mechanism that was created to solve disputes between privates is now being used to solve a dispute between a private and a public and a state. And this is, as we are going to see, one of the biggest flaws, because the state is a public institution. It's not a private institution. And this will have consequences. Now, in order to have these arbitrations, there has to be consent. How do a state consent, agrees to have arbitration? The most bilateral investment treaties, 65% of the cases that are being discussed, treated in ICSID are because of bilateral investment treaties. But also, you have free trade agreements, 5%, and other international agreements. The state has to give consent. But watch out, it's more complicated, because you can also give consent through national legislations, like investment laws of the host country, and investment contracts. The contracts that you sign with a particular company, an electric company, a company that's going to build a highway, whatever. What does it mean that a state gives consent? In these bilateral investment agreements, the state signs that if there is any dispute with the investor, that dispute will not be solved under the legal courts of the country, but it will be solved under an ISDS. And there, they say which rules are going to be applied. I hope you can follow me until here. So, to have an arbitration, you need to give consent. To give consent, where do you give the consent is the key. The most typical is the bilateral investment treaty. The case that you want to study with the European Union is a case of a free trade agreement that has a chapter on investment. In that chapter is where they want to give the consent. Now, what do I mean with the rules? You give the consent, to say, okay, if we have a problem, we're going to follow the International Center for Settlement of Investment Disputes, ICSID, rules. We can also say we're going to follow ICSID additional facilities, or we can follow the rules of the United Nations Commission on International Trade of Law. We can follow the rules of Stockholm Chamber of Commerce, of International Chamber of Commerce, or an ad hoc arbitration. So in the bilateral investment treaty, when you give consent, you say, we give consent and we are going to use this rule. You can say that we are going to use all of them. Many bilateral investment treaties, when are signed by the state says, our disputes can be solved here, 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 and here. Some say only here and here. Some can say only here. And that, there is a difference. Now, this one is where more disputes are presented. And this one is part of the World Bank. The World Bank. Now, why do we need BITs? Why do we need free trade agreements to give the consent? If you don't give the consent, and if you don't define which rules, you're not going to have ISDS. So, ICSID, that institution of the World Bank, was created in 1966. But only disputes have begun very late in the 1995s, the year 2000. You have, excuse me, these are the bilateral investment treaties. At the beginning, there were no bilateral investment treaties. So there was no consent. So there were almost no disputes. When bilateral investment treaties began to be signed, disputes began to arise. Because without giving the consent, you cannot have a dispute. That is why ICSID exists since many years ago, but as you can see, there were no disputes at the beginning. Now that we have so many bilateral investment treaties, you have these disputes. So you need BITs and rules to have a case of ISDS. ICSID is the most important one. It's part of the World Bank. Not all countries have signed and ratified the convention of ICSID. When the case against Bolivia began, Bolivia was in blue. If you're in blue, you have ratified the convention of ICSID. At that time, Bolivia was in blue. Thailand is in yellow. Why? Thailand has signed the convention of ICSID, but has not ratified. So you cannot bring Thailand to ICSID. So what does it mean? Thailand has not given the consent to bring any case to ICSID. But this country is Laos. Laos has given the consent. Malaysia has given the consent to bring cases to ICSID. Cambodia, no. So this is key in order to know where that process of arbitration is going to take place. Now, in the case of Bolivia, the issue was shocking. Why? Because why is it that Bolivia privatized the water utilities in the city of Cochabamba? Because it was one of the conditions of the loan of the World Bank to Bolivia. So Bolivia was going to receive a structural adjustment loan from the World Bank. And it said that it had to privatize the water utilities in the cities of La Paz and Cochabamba. When the privatization failed, the investor brought us to ICSID, and ICSID was part of the World Bank. But it happens that you need 3 arbitrators, like in the video that Jack Chice has showed. What happens? You appoint 1 arbitrator. The investor appoints another arbitrator. Who appoints the 3rd arbitrator? Both parties have to agree. But if they don't agree, in ICSID, who appoints the arbitrator is the chairman of the World Bank. So you force us to privatize because we wouldn't get the money. Now we have a case against Bolivia for $100 million, and now you're going to appoint the 3rd arbitrator. This has to be a joke, but it wasn't a joke. It was a reality. And in another city, in the city of La Paz, the situation was another part of the World Bank group, that is the International Finance Corporation, IFC, lent money to the foreign investor. So the World Bank was pushing for the privatization, lending money for the foreign investor, and if in case everything failed, we were going to be judged under the ICSID that is part of the World Bank. So that is how I began to learn what was ICSID. Give me 1 second.
I'm sorry.
In our constitution, I don't know how is the Thai constitution. The constitution of that time said very clearly that any foreigner or any corporation, enterprise of a foreigner had to be treated equally as a national corporation, not better. There should be no exceptions. So there should not be special treatment for a foreigner. That is what our constitution said. So then began the second discussion in Bolivia. Why did you sign bilateral investment treaties that give ISDS to foreign investors if the constitution says that you cannot treat them in a preferential way? All investors are equal. Because if you're a national investor, you cannot go to ISDS. Only this is for foreign investors. It's another thing that I learned about this issue. So foreign investors can use bilateral investment treaties to have the consent and bring the state to ICSID in the World Bank, but not a national investor. So we had a problem because we said, hey, all the bilateral investment treaties in Bolivia are violating the constitution because they have created 2 categories of investors. Investors of first class, foreign investors. Investors of second class, national investors. Now, Bechtel was an American company based in San Francisco. He was the main shareholder of Aguas del Tunari. That was the name of the corporation to whom it was privatized, the water facilities in Cochabamba. Aguas del Tunari was registered in the Cayman Islands. Why in the Cayman Islands? They don't pay taxes. But in the year 1999, just months before the contract was going to be broken, they transferred the legal registration to the Netherlands, where they only had a post box. In reality, and we went to the Netherlands, there is no Bechtel, no Aguas del Tunari, no office in Amsterdam or in The Hague. There is a post box. But they have registered it as Dutch. Why they did it? Why? To use the bilateral investment treaty between Bolivia and the Netherlands. And we said, if they are Americans, why don't they use the bilateral investment treaty between Bolivia and the United States? Because, no, US is part of ICSID. It's because the bilateral investment treaty with the Netherlands is more in favor of foreign investors than the bilateral investment treaty with the US. So they prefer to use the one that was going to give them more coverage, more support, and that was the one with the Netherlands and not the one with the US. That was why they used the consent in this bilateral investment treaty, and not the one that you would expect an American company uses the bilateral investment treaty with their country, that is the US. We had a very big discussion. And when I say we, at that time I was part of, like you have ftawatch, we had something similar, but in Bolivia, an ftawatch of Bolivia. And we say to the government, you cannot accept this. But the government said, no, we are going to go and we are going to win, because this case is going to be dropped. We're going to show that Bechtel is not Dutch. And because Bechtel is not Dutch, then they cannot invoke the bilateral investment treaty with the Netherlands, and everything will be over. What happened after 2 years? The tribunal, the 3 persons, one appointed by Bechtel, one appointed by Bolivia, and the third one appointed by the World Bank, they decided by majority that no, Aguas del Tunari can use any bilateral investment treaty, and there is no problem in using this bilateral investment treaty because they have legally registered there. And any corporation has the right to use the bilateral investment treaty that can give their corporation more coverage, more support. So the government of Bolivia was losing the case in ICSID, because there is always a first stage in any case of ICSID, that is jurisdiction. Does ICSID has jurisdiction or not? And they look on which bilateral investment treaty you are invoking. And in this case, they say, yes, they can sue Bolivia. So we were losing legally. But the other issue that we wanted to understand is the issue of compensation. Why they were asking between 25 and 100 million? They never invested that in Bolivia, but that was going to be their future profit. So the argument was, we have a contract with Bolivia that says that we are going to have a profit of 7% per year. And this contract was going to be for 40 years, and you cut it at the 6 months. So we lost all this profit. So it's not that they want their investment back. They want their future profit. And that is why they were asking for this compensation of 25 to 100 million. Now, the issue was that Bechtel is twice as big as Bolivia. Twice as big. And that what they were asking for us, meant 125,000 connections of water in the city of Cochabamba. That is what $25 million represented for us. And in lawyers, until that moment, the government spent almost around $1 million. And we were losing the case. Our strategy, before, and no public hearings, because this was the other problem. So we said, okay, it's our money. We're going to have to pay the $25 million. We want to be there. No, you can't. Come on, this is a private court. That is why arbitration is a mechanism of dispute that you use between private. So it's not public. We were not even able to present an amicus curiae. So we never got to know really what was happening. So because all of this, we said we're going to have a different strategy. And the strategy was we're going to do an international campaign against Bechtel. We are going to show the world that Bechtel, those are thieves. And they are bullying a country that is very poor. So the campaign was in San Francisco, where their headquarters are, in the Netherlands, in Bolivia, in Washington. People began to do demonstrations. There were resolutions from different kind of institutions. Personalities saying, hey, Bechtel, what are you doing? You cannot sue them for $25 million. There's a poor country, and you're going to do that? So the campaign began to grow and grow. And at the end, what happened? Bechtel said, okay, I'm going to sell you the company. So we bought the company for $1. And when we bought the company, of course, we were able to close the dispute in ICSID. But why did they sold us the company in $1? Not because we were winning in the arbitration. We were losing there because of the international campaign. And in 2007, at this time we were in the government, one of the things that we did was we're going to withdraw from ICSID. It was one of the most happiest moments in my life. To go to Washington and give them the letter and explain them why we're coming out of ICSID. Now, Ecuador and Venezuela have also withdrawn from ICSID. And in 2009, we approved a constitution that establishes that Bolivia has to renegotiate or denounce. Denounce is something like to delete, to revoke all bilateral investment treaties. And if they are going to be renegotiated, they have to be renegotiated without ISDS. And we managed to renegotiate some of the most important contracts with foreign companies in Bolivia. Because as I told you, you can be out of ICSID, you can renegotiate bilateral investment treaties, but if in a contract you have arbitration and you give the consent, you're still tied. They are not going to bring you to ICSID, but they can use UNCITRAL rules. They can use other rules to do the same process of arbitration. And now we're in a process of discussion to approve a new investment law. So I learned that this is not only a puzzle. This is a spider web. It's very easy to be caught, but it's very difficult to get out. Because if you want to get out, you have to solve the issue of the bilateral investment treaties, the free trade agreements, ICSID issues contracts with companies, investment law. That is the complication of this issue. Final, some lies about ISDS. The first one. Investors will not invest if there is no ISDS. Why is this a lie? There is in the world one country that doesn't have ISDS. It's not part of ICSID and has a great flow of foreign direct investment. And that country is Brazil. So it's not true that you need to have ISDS in order to have investment. And now the case of Bolivia shows that also. Now in Bolivia, there is the greatest flow of foreign direct investment. And as you know now, we are not part of ICSID. We are renegotiating bilateral investment treaties, and we don't want ISDS. Why do we still have foreign investment? Because foreign investment companies still have the possibility to make a profit in Bolivia. So what defines if an investor comes to your country is if he's going to make money or not. That is the key. Not that there is ISDS. There are countries that can have many bilateral investment treaties, sign all the conventions in relation to ISDS, and they don't have great flows of foreign direct investment. ISDS is a defensive measure for foreign investors. That is what they say. Why is this a lie? At the beginning, they said, oh, we need this because if the government expropriates our investment, we need to have a mechanism. But now what we are seeing and what the case of Bolivia shows and many others that you will see during the day is that it's not anymore about defending foreign investors, because with this mechanism, they are able to even change policies of governments. If you do this, we're going to sue you. Don't do this because we are going to present a case in ICSID. So the threat, the power of the threat is too big. Many cases in ICSID don't arrive to the last part, that is the award. They are solved outside. And in many of the cases, it's because the states prefer to solve the issue, give the company some kind of compensation, and not continue because of the threat of the case. They say that ISDS is not one-sided. And the history shows that 98% of the cases in ICSID are presented by foreign investors. They are not presented by states. The exception is a state. So there is a mechanism that only works because foreign investors present cases. If there has to be a mechanism, that mechanism has to be impartial. So this side and this other side. But that is not the case of ISDS. There is not one single country, one single state that has won a compensation in an ISDS process, as far as I know. Maybe there is one, but I can assure you, 99% have only given to compensations of foreign investors. The other lie is that we need ISDS because states have their national mechanism, their legal mechanism to deal with foreign investors, because states have their courts, judicial system, so we need something to balance that. But in reality, many of the corporations are much, much bigger and stronger than many of the states in the world. So it's almost impossible that a state that is very poor will spend so much money bringing a case against a corporation. It's very difficult. And they abuse that. At the end, I have learned one truth about ISDS. The best scenario for a state is not to lose the case. There are no victories for states. States, if they win, they don't receive compensation. The best you can do in ISDS if you're a state is not lose. Thank you very much.